Recording in progress.
Good afternoon, colleagues and honorable members. A quick one before the chairperson takes over. May the colleague or the honorable member who has joined using gadget number, where is this gadget now? It just disappeared. Gadget number
5368.
Yes, 5368-9461. Kindly identify yourself so that we can rename you quickly.
There's another one with 1834.
Yes, that's correct, Chairperson.
I'm undercover.
It's Honorable Swart. He says he's undercover. 1834 is Honorable Swart.
No, my name is there.
Okay. Colleagues, while Mr. Nodada is dealing with that issue, let me open this meeting and welcome all the honorable members from both the Select Committee on Appropriations and members from the Provincial Portfolio Committees on Finance as they were invited. And let me also welcome the colleagues from FFC and the colleagues from National Treasury. Mr. Nodada, I'm going to request you to check on whether all members are on the platform and kindly flight the agenda for us on the screen. Mr. Nodada?
Yes, Chairperson, I'm with you, Chair.
Do we have all expected honorable members on the platform, and kindly run through the apologies?
Okay, Chair. Let me upload the agenda, and I am going to confirm the attendance of honorable members. Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, let me check. There were two members who were not in earlier on. Okay, Honorable Suwisa has not joined yet. And Honorable Brits, all other members are in the platform, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I don't know if Honorable Siwesa will be able to join. She called me earlier. She was by the doctor. She has a terrible flu. And colleagues, looking at the agenda of the meeting, I'm going to request your indulgence, colleagues, as I'm looking at the items, and it's unusual for members to be having a meeting in the afternoon. I'm going to request that if you all agree, colleagues, can we allow us to remove item number 6, which is the consideration of the draft report on the oversight to Northwest Province, and agree that we will deal with that item on the 10th of December, as the program for that day is very short, so that we allow enough space for both the presentations and colleagues to deliberate on the two bills that is set before us today. I see Honorable Ndlovu and Honorable Swart are in agreement. Therefore, colleagues, thank you very much, Honorable Ryder. Therefore, colleagues, the item number 6 will fall off, and then we'll only have deliberations as item number 5, and deliberations again on item number 5, and then we'll have closure as item number 6. Thank you very much, colleagues, for your guidance and you agreeing to maybe removing that item from the platform, from today's items on the agenda. Colleagues, let me once again take this opportunity and welcome you to the meeting. And my apologies that our meeting is taking place at an unusual time for the committee in the afternoon, because we had to make space for the Select Committee on Finance to finalize its report and on the proposed 2025 fiscal framework. Therefore, we agreed that because we're not having a sitting, we'd rather have our meeting in the afternoon. And also, we were looking at the fact that National Treasury was engaged and would not be with us in the morning. Therefore, their availability also dictated that we needed to have this meeting in the afternoon. And Honorable Mbava and the team, thank you very much for always availing yourself whenever you are called to the meeting, no matter the time. Colleagues, I'm not going to bore you with a long opening. Today's meeting will be dealing with both the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill and the Adjustment Appropriation Bill. And we're going to first allow the National Treasury to do both the presentation. After that, I will allow the FFCC to make their presentations. Then honorable members will then deliberate on both the presentations from National Treasury on Fiscal and Financial Fiscal Commission. Having said that, colleagues, allow me to invite the National Treasury to give us the presentation on the two bills. Welcome once again, and over to you, National Treasury. Macharekwe, I don't know if you'll be the one leading us on the presentation or the DGs with us on the platform. I'm sorry for not acknowledging you specifically, but whoever that is delegated to lead the presentations on behalf of the National Treasury, you are invited to do so. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and Honorable members and colleagues on the platform. So the teams are led by two DDGs, myself and DDG Britain from Public Finance. They will do the adjustment appropriation bill. In our side from IGR, will do the Division of Revenue. Over to you, Dr. Pakis, on the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill.
No, thanks, TDG, and thanks to the chairperson, and good afternoon to the honorable members. I hope you can see my presentation. It's on slide mode. This being the outline of our presentation today, where we're going to give you an overview of what is contained in the Division of Revenue bill, and that includes the changes that have been made to the schedules, the clauses, allocation to both provinces and municipalities, as well as the grant frameworks that we will be asking you to consider as well. And then in the latter part of the presentation, honorable members, I will be taking you through some of the reforms. In the most part, it's just to provide you with an update in terms of where we are in the process of implementing those reforms, because we've already really spoken to you about most of those reforms. Just to give you a high-level background to the amendment bill, honorable members, is that you would know that this is the bill that proposes changes to the main Division of Revenue Act, which we have considered and will sign into law. And subsequent to that, we then also gazetted the frameworks as well as individual allocations per municipalities, and also additional detail that was necessary at the time. So we are allowed then by Section 30 2 of the PFMA to then make adjustments to those allocations, provided we run those past you and you then consider them as well. So in the main, this is really just the changes on the margins, honorable members. It's not envisaged that it will change the course of the process that was followed in the main bill, but it's mainly to just assist us in terms of correcting some errors and omissions at the time of the budget, but to also take into account that there may have been in that process some unforeseen and unavoidable expenditure that needs to be taken care of, but also where there are savings in their areas that are showing underspending, that we can have an opportunity to then correct the allocation and address those particular areas. Of course, there's also the rollover process, which then was run subsequent to the finalization of the main bill, which is the Division of Revenue Act. Now we're just bringing to you the outcomes of the process as it unfolded. Honorable members, there are some changes also beyond just the allocations, taking into account some of the development, especially in the Western Cape, where there is an intention from provincial government to promulgate the assignment of the library function to certain municipalities. And then we're just closing the loop in terms of providing guidance in terms of the process that required to be followed to ensure that we don't experience the kind of issues we have now around continued unfunded mandates. So in essence, what this change entails is that it really brings the provincial department as well as a municipality, in agreeing on a payment schedule, but then that also being shared with the provincial treasury, who would then ultimately share it with us so that we can hold the sector and the province accountable around these things, as well as the process of gazetting allocations that need to be made available to municipalities. This is to also ensure that we bring about some transparency in the process as well. So, honorable members, when we spoke with yourselves, when you considered the 2025 Division of Revenue Bill, at the time, you were looking at column A. That is what we're talking about with relation to the 25-26 financial year. We're coming to you now saying in those allocations in column A, at the time, we will be splitting it into two. The first, which now moves me to the bottom table. So the first column there that has the numbers, it's the main appropriation. So it is the same as what was in column A of the main budget. And then what you see now is adjustments. Those are the proposed changes that are being made to the allocations, which will, of course, then result in the adjusted allocation, meaning that once this process is complete, what is in the adjusted budget allocation is then what is going to flow through these three spheres of government, provided, of course, that Parliament does support this particular bill. So, honorable members, there are a number of allocations that have been made. So 4.6 billion has been added into the provincial equitable share to just cushion 3 of our provinces, which is Gauteng, Northwest, as well as Free State. These were majorly affected by the changes in terms of the demographic data that we received from Stats SA, the shift from 2025 to 2026 media populations, as well as an update that we had made with regards to the GDP data there. So these were the biggest losers in that process. And then in his speech, the minister had promised that should a revenue position allow, he would then assist these provinces in dealing with those pressures in their budgets. Of course, this has since been done, and the 4.6 billion is provided in here, but it is meant to then be apportioned by the relevant provincial treasuries across the 3 years where this impact was picked up. And the provincial treasuries, both at the MEC as well as the HOD levels, have been supported in terms of ensuring that they understand how these funds will then be utilized and how they should be absorbed into the provincial revenue funds. There is also additional allocations, honorable members, that realize that there is a need to respond to the disasters, especially those that took place and were classified in June, which affected in the main the Eastern Cape as well as KZN. So 644 million is then added to the provincial conditional grants to assist with the reconstruction in that space. So this is channeled through a number of conditional grants, including the education infrastructure grant, health, as well as some transport grants as well. Again, honorable members, the budget facility for infrastructure has been quite helpful. So there are 2 regional hospitals that are getting some allocations from that pot. So these would be channeled through the health facility refied grant for those 2 hospitals in the Western Cape, 22 million as well as 31 million to the other one. As the process allows, honorable members, there is also some rollovers as well in the health sector as well, which will see 33 million being added. So Limpopo Central Hospital will be a beneficiary with 14 million, and as well as Free State clinics, 2 Free State clinics, which will also get 9 million and 10 million respectively. It's important to note, honorable members, that this process actually, there is proof of commitment that had to come for this to then be considered favorable as well. There is also reprioritization from the school infrastructure backlogs grants, where money is being shifted from that grant, which is an indirect grant managed by the Department of Basic Education, to then fund the pressures in terms of the workbook projects. So that is 300 million, and then there's also infrastructure assessment, a portion of 43 million. Again, honorable members, this was possible to some of the savings that we realized from that grant as well. I have indicated that this is also an opportunity to correct some of the errors. So in this slide, it really contains a number of errors that are being corrected for. So in the main, if we look at the National Tertiary Services Grant, allocations were made erroneously to Eastern Cape as well as Northwest. And these were the funds that were meant for the Western Cape Health Department. So we're correcting for that. And there's an understanding within the sector. There were letters that were written by the National Department to clarify this. Also, in terms of the Human Settlement Development Grant, there is 863,000 that is allocated through this grant, as well as the Informal Settlement Partnership Grant allocating 197,000. So these are allocations that were meant to address the cost really in terms of the wage negotiation that was agreed upon. So these funds were meant to have been included as part of the provincial equitable share still for KZN province. So we have done that now in correcting for this add-on. Honorable members, again, as there was a response for disasters for provincial government, there is also additional funding that has been made available for municipalities as well. So these, in the main, are made through the Municipal Disaster Recovery Grant, and these are to fund the reconstruction of the infrastructure that was damaged. In the main, this is in the municipalities in the Eastern Cape, where 496 million is being added. Again, honorable members, there's a confirmation of what in the main budget was the provisional allocation for the Metro Trade Services reform. So the 2.1 billion is being confirmed as an incentive now that can be transferred to municipalities in line with the plans that that process has taken care of as well. There is also, lastly on this point, a rollover of about 303 million for eThekwini. This is within the public transport network grant as well. Honorable members, as you would note that some of these allocations, of course, have an impact in terms of the frameworks themselves. And according to Section 15(4) of the Division of Revenue Act, we then are required to consult with yourselves in terms of any proposed changes to the conditional grants framework, whether we are correcting for errors or the omissions that would be there. But in this case, honorable members, we're just ensuring that the money that was added through these many conditional grants is actually earmarked specifically for the purposes and that it was meant for. So the frameworks will then show that a certain portion is to respond to disasters so that it can then not be used for any other processes as well. So this cuts across the provincial as well as the local government grant, but we're also earmarking the money that is coming from the budget facility for infrastructure because it is for planning purposes for those regional hospitals as well. So just to ensure that there is no confusion in the system. Again, honorable members, so these would then be, if you approve that we can then make these changes, then once the bill is enacted, we will then be gazetting these frameworks along with these other annexures, as well as the appendices as well. So, honorable members, of course, there were other allocations that are not reflected in terms of the 2025 Division of Revenue Amendment Bill. And this is precisely because the law allows the minister, where there is the reasonable prospects of delaying such allocations are not there, that he can then use a certain section within the Appropriation Act, which is Section 6, to then do this. So the provinces were quite pressured in terms of the funding, in terms of their baselines, especially for health and education. So the Minister of Finance has then released the 9.7 billion to address those pressures. But there are also other allocations as well that are related to the PEPFAR funding. I think the appropriation bill will speak much about that as well. So in terms of the allocations that are not reflected in the Division of Revenue but are related to the disasters, as you could see in the main, those that were within the provinces of KZN as well as Eastern Cape were provided for in the bill. But outside of that, for those disasters that occurred between April 2024 and March 2025, there's also a response to assist those provinces and municipalities to deal with those, and that was also again done through Section 6 of the Appropriation Act. Again here, honorable members, it's important to note that we are in the process of gazetting those allocations to ensure that the funds reach these provinces and municipalities as well. So we do have a breakdown in my next slide around who the beneficiaries are. Quite important at this point is that letters of allocations have been written to the transferring officers because these funds are flowing through various conventional grants where we're notifying them of the additional allocations and what they are for, and then the need to then have a revised payment schedule as a result. So here we are, honorable members. This shows who the other grants and that are affected, including obviously the provincial equitable share for some of these funds where they will be flowing through as well. So this covers really all the provisional allocations that are not included in the bill for transparency purposes as well. The honorable members would have noted that there's been quite a shift towards provinces and local government in terms of the share. This is really following the confirmation of the provisional allocations for education and health for provinces, as well as the metro trading services for local government as well. So we do see some improvement in terms of the share of subnational government as well. These are the updates, honorable members, that I had spoken about, where you had already considered this, and now we're just confirming which of those will be implemented as part of the 2026 budget. And one of those is in the agriculture space, the merger of the Comprehensive Agriculture Support Program together with Ilimalitsima. So there have been some workshops that the Department of Agriculture supported by ourselves have been having to ensure really that there is no disturbance in terms of the sector, so that there's still the benefit that the farmers are enjoying from this. So this measure is again intended to really streamline administration, but to also just eliminate some of the duplications that were inherent when these two grants were operating on their own. Again, honorable members, this is something we brought to you before in terms of the merger of the education infrastructure grant as well as the school backlogs grant. What we're saying now is the process of the merger is well underway. As over 26-27 financial year, there will only be 450 million that is allocated. That will be within the school backlogs grant, with the rest of the money being shifted to the education infrastructure grant. Again, this is important that what is left in the backlogs grant is to really ensure and finalize the projects that are currently underway, where the prospects of transferring these to the provinces whilst they are not complete is not so neat. So the department is working with the provinces to ensure that this transition is quite seamless as well. Same applies to the sport, arts and culture space, where the community libraries grant is being incorporated into the provincial equitable share. So the first manner here is we're going to be starting with compensation of employees, and then at a later stage, then move the rest of the grant, which is for infrastructure, towards the provincial equitable share. Again, honorable members, it's important to indicate at this point that consultation is yet underway on this part. So they will be using the 26-27 to finalize that, so that there aren't any issues when the full incorporation into the provincial equitable share is done. In the local government space, the 2026 budget will see the merger of the two conditional grants that are managed by the Department of Electricity and Energy. Here it is the Integrated National Electricity program grant with the energy efficiency demand side management grant as well. Again, the department has also ensured that the projects that are on the ground will not be adversely impacted by this. We continue to manage and support the Department of Water and Sanitation, as well as those that of cooperative governance, in terms of ensuring that they deal with some of the overlaps in the water provision space, but also ensuring that those grants that fund water in those spaces are actually rationalized. So there are some outstanding meetings that are required to ensure that we close that gap. The minister has already announced that the public transport network grant will be phased out over the MTF period. So this is a big and quite an important reform in the system, and we are engaged in discussions with the Department of Transport to then explore what this means and how to do this in a more responsible manner, but also what the alternatives are as public transport continues to be a key function for this government as well. Again, the National Treasury is also looking inwardly in terms of its grant. So there are a number of grants that will be phased out. So the Infrastructure Skills Development Grant, as well as the Neighborhood Development Partnership Grant, will be discontinued. This will be in the 2026 MTF as well. And there are measures in place to also ensure that whatever was funded from these grants, the critical parts of them are also amplified and funded elsewhere in the system as well. The Metro Trading Services reform, honorable members, over and above the incentive that I have spoken about, there is also a shift in terms of funding from the Urban Settlement Development Grant towards the Urban Development Financing Grant. So the USDT will be reduced by the 19.3 billion to ensure that there's one pot really from government that goes to the metros to assist with metro trading services in that space as well, and also to then augment the incentive there. So we do think that this move is quite positive because it's going to ensure that municipalities are better supported in terms of dealing with the trading services challenges, that they are able to then invest more strategically in that. And we still see the trading services really as a point that is quite important if we are to turn around our metros as well. It starts with the metros, but then the idea is that this is going to cascade to other municipalities once we have seen and learned from this particular incentive as well. The Municipal Infrastructure Grant, honorable members, is the biggest conditional grant to local government. In fact, it is also one of the grants, infrastructure grants, that goes to most municipalities. And what we've experienced in the past is that there are capacity deficiencies across many municipalities, especially the small and rural ones. So we are exploring some reforms in that space where we're bringing our agencies that are capable of assisting. So we're exploring the role of MISA as well as the DBSA in ensuring that the delivery is not impacted when municipalities are failing to do what is expected of them even after some capacity has been provided to them. So this is quite important reform because those that have no issues spending and also having these properly implemented programs would continue to receive the normal MIG allocation because they would have shown to us that they're quite responsible in doing that. But for those that struggle, we're exploring how we can then use these agencies to then assist in terms of an indirect delivery model as well. So the white paper is then going to help us in terms of a more long-term solution to those kind of issues, but it would be quite irresponsible of us not to respond when these issues are emerging in the immediate moment. DDG and Honorable Chair and members, thank you. The presentation ends here.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. We're handing over to DDG for Public Finance now.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable Members. Taking you through the adjusted appropriation bill. The presentation basically outlines the when we in the PFMA we get authority to adjust the budget, the process that's outlined in the Money Bills Amendment and Procedures and Related Matters Act, and then just articulates the details of the different components of the budget that is being adjusted. As mentioned by Dr. Pakis, so I won't go through this. In Section 32A, it outlines what the Minister of Finance is allowed to table an adjustments budget for. And just to highlight in terms of Section 12 of the Money Bills Act, that through this process, there's a sequence around all of this, with the adjustments appropriation bill being processed last. The expenditure memorandum for the details on what is in the adjustments appropriation bill is then articulated in the adjusted estimates of national expenditure. A summary of what is in the adjustments budget and what's in the adjusted appropriation bill that I will go through in detail a little bit later, but just to highlight some volume and shifts that we are seeing from compensation of employees into goods and services. We're also seeing some reclassification of funds. What we also include here are the provisional allocations that was not appropriated, what we have in the contingency reserve, and then some other adjustments that we make that gives us a revised outlook on what the adjusted appropriation amount is and the revised estimates of expenditure for this year. The details around all of this, we'll start with what the Minister of Finance announced in the budget. He announced as part of the provisional allocations, the allocations on vote 8, vote 16, so vote 8 is National Treasury, vote 16 in basic aid for ECD, the early retirement funds that is now being allocated to defense, and the provisional allocations for health and education that flows through the provincial equitable share. The other allocations that are provided for here are things which at the time of the budget we did not have finalization on, and this would include the hosting of the national dialogue and some adjustments that we are making on the BFI, and then also about strengthening the capabilities of the Office of the Chief Justice, the Department of Home Affairs, and Stats SA. In relation to unforeseeable, unavoidable expenditure, we have 1.6 billion rand allocated for disasters that happened after the finalization of the 2025 budget. I will talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we're seeing before the finalization of the 2025 budget. And so mostly for disasters. The other allocation to note around here is for, as unforeseeable and unavoidable, is for the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development for the currently ongoing Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. In relation to rollovers, we have rollovers, which is really about expenditures where commitments have been made, invoices were issued and submitted, but had not yet been verified by the time of the end of the financial year, which resulted in departments not making any payments. The largest of that relates to the social assistance transfer. So these are social grants where people have been approved as beneficiaries for the grants, but given some of the income verification processes that had to take place, they were not able to transfer the funds before the end of the financial year. The second largest component of this relates to phases 1 and 2 of SA Connect. Specifically phase 2, which is a capital project, and this is to finalize the project. Members will be aware that this was a multi-year a project that was supposed to come to an end, because that's when the construction components of the project comes to an end, and the rollover is really related to the finalization of the construction part of the project. In relation to human settlements, this has got to do with emergency housing. And as Dr. Pakis had mentioned, the large part of what is in the Department of Transport relates to the rollover for eThekwini municipality in the public transport network grant. On self-financing expenditures, Honorable members, this is expenditure where departments generate revenue that gets deposited into the National Revenue Fund, and then we appropriate it back to them to cover the costs associated with that. The most notable one here is for Home Affairs, and this is related to the printing of official documents, so passports and IDs, where they generate revenue that gets deposited into the National Revenue Fund, and then we pay it back to them to cover the costs associated with that. The second is, of course, on defense, mostly related to reimbursements from the UN for defense deployments that are made. Honorable members, this part is related to expenditures in terms of Section 6 of the Appropriation Act, and this relates to disasters that have occurred before the finalization of the budget. So these are disasters that we did not accommodate in the 2025 budget or in the 2024-25 adjustments budget. So in short, I suppose they are backlog disasters. So, and we treat this similar to what we do with Section 6 or Section 16 allocations, where specifically Section 6.4 of the Appropriation Act that requires that the Minister of Finance, when he approves such allocations, has to include it in the next adjustments budget or to table it within a special appropriation within 120 days of it being made. So that is why this is included in this adjustments budget to comply with the provisions that we have in 6.4. We also have a shifting of funds between vote and that relates mostly to the G20 that comes off the Department of Transport. This 583 million rand that we are shifting from the Department of Transport, together with the 4.4 billion rand of declared unspent funds, makes up about 5 billion rand that we are proposing being reduced from the transfer that the Department of Transport makes to SANRAL. And this is because SANRAL is sitting on large cash balances in relation to its non-toll portfolio. What we are asking SANRAL to do here is to first spend the money that it has before any further transfers are being made from the Department of Transport's budget. The second largest component of this relates to delays on the construction of the Umkomazi water project. So this is the water scheme project that transfers water between the Umkomazi and the Mgeni rivers. And construction is only due to start, I think it's in 2027 or in 2028, even though the money is on the budget. The delays associated with this relates mostly to some water supply agreements that was delayed. So from municipalities who have to sign up on all of this to get projects to financial conclusion. And we also have delays around procurement and environmental authorizations. The billion rand from social development relates to lower than projected beneficiaries that we have in the system, partly because of the verification processes that are happening that reduces the uptake around all of this. Chair, a summary of the environments that we have in the system, and this is shifts between main divisions within the vote. Some of this requires parliamentary approval. Some of this the Minister of Finance can authorize, and the National Treasury can also authorize some of these. The most notable ones on this table is in education, in basic education, that relates to the unearmarking of funds in specific and exclusively appropriated allocations. In higher education, this relates to compensation of employees from the TVET system into the program on community education training. In relation to police, which is quite big, a large component of that is from compensation of employees to goods and services. That relates to savings that comes from trainees that haven't been absorbed into the service yet. So the savings that comes from us budgeting for their salaries for the full year, as opposed to only for part of the year, that results in savings that goes into the maintenance of existing IT systems that the police runs. The 3.1 billion, 3.2 billion rand environment in transport is mostly related to, I think 2.4 billion of that is mostly related to an incorrectly classified allocation that we made at the main budget. So, and this relates to the Gauteng Freeway Improvement Program, where all the funds that was allocated went into paying off debt when there was supposed to be a component of that pays for the backlog maintenance around the Gauteng national road network. Environments that requires parliamentary approval, and they happen under very specific conditions where where shifts between programs is more than 8%. The second would be for unearmarking of funds that the Minister of Finance doesn't have the authority to do. And the third would be related to donations beyond 100,000 rand. I'll explain that when I get to that one. So this environment is because it is more than 8% of the program that requires Parliament's approval. The environment in basic education relates to an unearmarking that requires Parliament's approval in specifically in exclusively earmarked allocations. Similarly with the one in health, in the health indirect grant, the health revitalization indirect grant, in IPIT, this is an increase of more than 8% or a shift of more than 8% of the budget. Similarly, in the Department of Military Veterans and in Communications and Digital Technologies, this is one that relates to a donation that is more than 100,000. The Treasury regulations requires us that donations or sponsorships that are more than 100,000 rand must be provided for separately in the Appropriations Bill and requires parliamentary approval. So making this just over 2.2 million rands donation would require Parliament's approval before the money can be transferred. The environments in the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment also relates to it being more than 8%. And similarly in the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. Chair, just in the interest of transparency, this environment doesn't require parliamentary approval, but that is how we published it. And so we had incorrectly kind of allocated the footnote around all of this. This required Treasury approval and not necessarily parliamentary approval, but I wanted to show this because this is what we have in the publication. Then the last one, Chair, is the environment in land reform and rural development. This is over a third of the program budget that they are asking to shift into other things, most notably from infrastructure planning. So this would be that provides for mostly paying compensation to households in the land reform, land restitution program, and to pay to contractors for the implementation of rural infrastructure programs that are ongoing. So what this means is money is moving from planning, or half of it is moving from planning into implementation, and then also to deal with smaller issues. The smaller component of this environment really relates to legal services around getting opinions from the state law advisor and paying for legal fees where there were contestations around land valuations. And that is where I end, Chair. Thank you very much.
Makaurekwe, are we done?
Yes, National Treasury is done, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Team National Treasury. I will right away invite Dr. Mbava to lead the presentations of FFC. Welcome, Dr. Mbava. You may lead the presentation.
Thank you so much, Chair. Good afternoon to yourself and good afternoon to the honorable members, colleagues from National Treasury, support staff. Thank you for the opportunity, Chair, to comment on the respective bills. May I ask the FFC research team to flight the slides? Thank you so much, Chair. I will not waste time. I would like to just zone in on slide 4, which is essentially the agenda of our presentation to yourselves today. I think our mandate is well known by this committee and the role that we play in informing the committee, providing independent assessment and analysis of the 2025 Adjustment Appropriation Bill, the Special Appropriation Bill for 2025, the Division of Revenue Bill at provincial as well as local government level. Those are the bills that we're going to comment on. On the next slide, I will hand over to the Head of Research to just give an overview and then the research team to take us through. Thank you so much. Chen, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Honourable Chair members. And following what has already been presented, but I think what's from FFC's perspective, what one is should take note of is how the overarching allocation of the allocations to the various spheres of governments that is impacting that is the budget or the divisional revenue as such, is that they essentially as separate as we are presenting the Adjustment Appropriation Bill or the Divisional Revenue Amendment Bill, as well as along with the medium term, as earlier National Treasury colleagues have presented to you, is that they are interrelated, as also it's well written in terms of the Constitution. Specifically, let me raise 2 points. One is that notice how these bills, as separate as they were, many of the allocations actually, as they are allocated through the divisional revenue, but it affects the budgets and the allocations at the national level per the appropriation bill. And similarly, and this is because of some of these grants and the direct grants and indirect grants are all vested in the budgets of the national departments, allocating towards directly or indirectly towards the provinces and local governments, as in the divisional revenue bill. And number two is that also kindly notice that how the fiscal trend of these allocations have occurred. I think right now, as our focus is about these adjustment bill and the amendment bill, it's the in-year adjustments. However, is that how the instruments of the divisional revenue and the appropriations is affected in this in-year adjustment process. Specifically, is that we need to think of how that the current in-year adjustments is sitting aligned or not aligned with the medium-term trajectories of the allocations towards divisional revenue. It would not make sense. In other words, I'm trying to ultimately impress upon the honorable chair members is, in other words, it would not make good budgeting sense to have allocated, right, in the various financial year allocations, but then only to adjust in the opposite direction during the adjustment period. You see, similarly, so in other words, we need to be very careful about, as we are adjusting now, the in-year adjustments, how does it sit with the medium-term trajectories of the allocations? And we need to be very clear about those reasonings behind these adjustments. And making sure that what that means in terms of how long a planning and implementation period for this, from a project management perspective, are these allocations. With those few words, let me hand over to my team to take you over to the technicalities, but always remember the reasonings behind those. And some of those, unfortunately, I have to say, and which is why we need to deliberate on, are those reasons may not make sense. Thank you, Chair.
Good afternoon, Chair and honourable members, and as well as National Treasury colleagues. My name is Fabrice Katobiege. I will take you through our analysis on the 2025 Adjustment Appropriation Bill, as well as the Special Appropriation Bill. So on this slide, it just gives a summary of the headline figures of the 2025 Adjustment Appropriation Bill. So the Commission notes the adjustments totaling 10.1 billion for 2025-26. What we'd like to just point out here and stress to members, when it comes to these adjustments, there's been significant a significant large amount of 5.2 billion when it comes to rollovers. So from the Commission's point of view, this provides a really a key message when it comes to some challenges that are being experienced when it comes to project execution. As well, the other figure that we'd like to highlight here is the 1.6 billion in unforeseeable and unavoidable expenditure, again related to the natural disasters. And this again points to the fact that we have to look at how to better budget for such circumstances, as we know that climate change and these sort of climate events are becoming more frequent, have become more frequent over the years. On the next slide, we provide a snapshot of the votes that experienced significant adjustments. So on the upward adjustment side, the communication and digital technologies vote saw an upward adjustment of close to 40%. And this was mainly due to 1 billion rand rollover related to the South African Connect Broadband project, which again, as I mentioned, highlights some of the project execution challenges that are being experienced. And then the Home Affairs vote saw an upward adjustment of 27%. And as our National Treasury colleagues mentioned, this was mainly reflects the 2.5 billion in self-financing from service fees. On the other end, the votes that saw significant downward adjustment were the water and sanitation votes. We saw a downward adjustment of 12.4%, and that reflects the delays related to the Nkomazi water project, which here the Commission would like to highlight really does undermine the water delivery for the KwaZulu-Natal province. And then the transport vote saw a downward adjustment of 4.1%. That's mainly due to SANRAL's large cash balances. The Commission related to this vote would like to point out the 3.2 million that has also been rolled over for the finalization of the National Rail Devolution Strategy, which is a strategy that the Commission has long stressed needs to be finalized in order to provide the certainty with respect to passenger rail, the passenger rail environment. This slide looks at the learning, culture, health, and social development votes. And here we take note of 3 votes. So firstly, the basic education vote saw an upward adjustment of close to 8%. And this reflects the funds that are allocated towards the early childhood development grant expansion, as well as over 450 million that goes to the repair of infrastructure that has been damaged by floods. And again, this underscores the need for climate budget resilience. On the social development vote, it saw a minor upward adjustment of 0.4%. That relates to the payment of outstanding COVID-19 SRD grant payments. And here the Commission would like to stress to members that as the Minister of Finance announced, this grant will again be extended until the end of March 2027. Now, the rationale behind this was that proposals need to be finalized in order that are linking these grant beneficiaries to skills and employment opportunities. Now, while this does align with the previous recommendations that the Commission has made, these continuous extensions do really highlight the urgent need for a finalized sustainable income support system and the need for fiscal certainty to avoid such repeated occurrences of making these continuous extensions to such a grant without really any foresight. On the social development side, continuing on that, the Commission does welcome the initiative to eliminate fraud within the grant administration system, which aligns with the Commission's 2024 MTBBS recommendations, which called for the department to implement rigorous oversight and robust systems to enhance grant administrative efficiency. Finally, on the health vote, it saw an upward adjustment of 1.7%, and that includes 40 million for unforeseeable and unavoidable expenditure for repair of infrastructure that was damaged by natural disasters in the Eastern Cape. On the economic development votes, what we'd like to really highlight here is the combined agricultural land reform and rural development votes, which saw a 5.6% upward revision. And that's related to disaster infrastructure funding that occurred in 2024 and 2025, as well as close to 650 million rolled over to settle restitution claims in the KwaZulu-Natal region. So again, looking specifically at such a critical and important vote or economic engine that comes with agricultural land reform and rural development, the need for looking at better ways to incorporate and making sure infrastructure that we are building is really climate resilient is important here. On the peace and security votes, the Office of the Chief Justice received the upward adjustment of close to 7%, and that's related to strengthening its capacities, which the Commission notes is vital for administrative efficiency of the highest courts and the delivery of justice. On the defense vote, it saw an upward adjustment of 3.3%, and that's related for funds going to the early retirement program, as well as reinvestment of revenue into border security, internal stability operations, as well as equipment upgrades, which the Commission supports. When looking at the direct charges against the National Revenue Fund, the two key takeaways that we'd like to highlight from this slide is firstly, the debt service costs were revised or adjusted downwards by 4.8 billion, and that reflects favorable macroeconomic factors in the form of lower interest rates, lower inflation, and a stronger currency. And on the provincial equitable share, it received a 3.2% upward adjustment, and that reflects allocations to cover the cost for compensation of employees and goods and services in the provincial education and health departments, as well as to compensate the provinces of Free State, Gauteng, Northwest for formula changes based on updated population data. Moving on to the 2025 Special Appropriation Bill. Now, this bill allocates an amount of 754.5 million to the health vote, and that's to help cover the shortfalls resulting from the withdrawal of international donor funding namely related to the PEPFAR. Now, of that 754,590,000 is allocated to provinces, but the Commission would like to just highlight here that allocating these funds really places a significant burden on a already overstretched provincial health system, and there was really no clarity as to how much of this amount would go to NGOs that are also important in the delivery of health services. Overall, on the special appropriation bill, the Commission would just like to highlight to honourable members, and something with deliberation, is that given the recent developments in terms of the exemption of PEPFAR from spending cuts by the US government, as well as the PEPFAR bridge plan to the value of $115 million for the 6-month period covering the 1st of October 2025 until the end of March 2026, it's worth considering whether such an appropriation bill is still needed in light of these recent events related to the US government decisions. Moving on to the recommendations emanating from this section on the appropriation bill. So firstly, the Commission would like to recommend that the government infrastructure prioritization during the MTEF period be complemented by robust project management across the entire project lifecycle. Secondly, the Commission recommends that the Minister of Finance look to proactively build fiscal buffers into the budget to mitigate climate-related shocks. Thirdly, the Commission, as I mentioned earlier, supports the initiative to eliminate double dipping, but recommends that the Minister of Social Development put in place key measures, including implementing regular third-party data audits, strengthening the department's internal audit and compliance functions, and the delivery of mandatory staff training on fraud detection and ethical conduct. Fourthly, in light of the current volatility and uncertainty around global health funding, particularly in relation to the US government's American First policy, the Commission recommends that the Minister of Health, in collaboration with the Minister of Finance, look to develop a multi-year domestically funded financing strategy for the country's HIV/AIDS response. And finally, the Commission recommends that the Portfolio Committee on Higher Education and Training, collaboration with the department, organized labor employees and professional bodies conduct a comprehensive review of the sector education and training authorities. Now, this should be with the aim of identifying and eliminating functional overlaps and duplication with the view of ensuring a more streamlined and future-proofed skills development system. Thank you, Chair and honorable members. I would like to hand over to my colleague to go through the next section.
Good day, honorable members, chairperson, and all other officials present in the platform. I'm Sabelo Mtandato. I will take you through the division of revenue as it relates to provinces. And then as we start here is that the total allocation for provinces has increased from 767.8 billion in the main budget and then to 787 billion in the revised budget. So this represents an increase of 3% from what was budgeted, from what was provided during the early this year. And then of this adjusted budget, key to note is that 82.3%, that is 647.4 billion, is for equitable share, while 17.7% is in the form of conditional grants. Furthermore, to note here is that the PS has been increased by 2%. That is an increase of from 633.2 billion to 647.6 billion. While on the other hand, conditional grants have been increased by about 4%, increasing from 134.6 billion to 139.4 billion, as shown in the table. The next slide. Next slide, please. Okay. Here, what we are showing here is that now it leads to the provincial equitable share, how much it has been revised and for how much for each province. Clearly, what you can see here is in line with what my colleague Fabrice has already presented is that there's been adjustments almost to all provinces, but the most adjustment has been, as you can see, in the Northwest and Gauteng, among other provinces. And then there's been some other adjustments for other provinces, which are ranging from 1% to 2%. And what we see here is that this adjustment that we see of 2% in aggregate, which resulted in the increase from 633.2 billion to 647.6 billion, is meant to support the cost associated with the public wage bill agreement. And also, as Fabrice has mentioned, adjustments that have been made as a result of the data update for the 2025 MTF as a result of data on the real GDP and population figures. Next slide. So here, honorable members, we are showing adjustments that have been made within conditional grants for provinces. What we see here is a total allocation for provinces, as we indicated, has been increased from 134.6 billion to 139.4 billion. And an additional amount that has been provided here has been made available, mainly is for reconstruction and rehabilitation of infrastructure that was destroyed and damaged by rain, floods, and strong winds, particularly in two provinces, that is Eastern Cape and the KZN. Key to note here is that this additional amount or allocation that has been made has been channeled through three key grants. that is Educational Infrastructure Grant, Health Facility Revitalization Grant, and Provincial Roads Maintenance Grant. Furthermore, to note here, honorable members, is that funding for the School Infrastructure Backlog Grant has been significantly reduced, as you can see in the graph, reduced by 21%, as funds have been shifted from this grant to fund workbooks, project, and infrastructure assessments. While the Education Infrastructure Grant has been increased by 3%, mainly as we've mentioned, for floods and wind damaged infrastructure. Key to note here, one of developments is that there will be a merger in some of key conditional grants with provinces. So that includes merging CASP, that is Comprehensive Agricultural Support Program grant, with Ilimali Zima in the 2026-27 financial year, and the merging of School Infrastructure Backlog Grant with Education Infrastructure Grant from the 2027 MTF. The next slide. Then what we did here as a commission, we took some of the grants that have been significantly reduced or adjusted up. Then, as we indicated previously, that with respect to the Education Infrastructure Grant, 454 million has been added for flood and wind damaged infrastructure. And this is for two provinces in the main. The Eastern Cape, that has received 354 million, and the KZN, that has received 100 million. As we indicated, a significant reduction has been made, which is about 21% for the School Infrastructure Backlog Grant, where we've seen an amount of 343 million being reprioritized for workbooks and infrastructure assessment. While the Commission support the merging of this grant and the Education Infrastructure Grant, but the Commission is concerned because now, as we're merging these two grants, the School Infrastructure Backlog Grant has been reduced already. Then now there's a possibility that maybe objectives or intentions of this grant could be overlooked after this grant has been merged with the Education Infrastructure Grant. Therefore, the Commission is calling for the National Department of Basic Education to closely monitor the utilization of the merged grant to ensure that there is accountability that continues, proper reporting is made, and objectives of the School Infrastructure Backlog Grant is not overlooked. Next slide. This other grant on the right just shows how much each province has been affected. You can see here that, for example, Limpopo's allocation has been reduced by 83%, followed by Free State, that has been reduced by 73%. And these are significant reductions which could affect the attainment of the goals of the grant. Next slide. Here, honorable members, it's just some of the recommendations that the Commission is putting forward. So firstly, the Commission notes the merger of CASP, that is Comprehensive Agricultural Support Program, with Ilimali Zima as from the 2027 MTF, but reiterates its recommendation that it has made earlier on, that the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development consolidate all three grants. This is a step in the right direction, but Commission calls also for this grant all the three grants to be merged, that is Ilimali Zima, CASP, as well as land care, together with all other funding streams that are available for smallholder farmers. A consolidated framework will better promote the long-term sustainability of smallholder farmers. Secondly, honorable members, the Commission welcomes the phased integration of School Infrastructure Backlog Grant into Education Infrastructure Grant, recognizing potential for improved accountability. However, the Commission recommends that the National Department of Basic Education should closely monitor implementation to ensure that the key objectives, which will include eliminating of inappropriate school structures, ensure access to water and electricity, remains uncompromised after the grant has been merged. Lastly, honorable members, the Commission supports the allocation of disaster relief fund to provinces affected by floods and severe winds. However, again, Commission reiterates its 2024 MPS recommendation that provinces should adopt a proactive risk management measures through strategic infrastructure planning and adaptive budgeting to mitigate future impacts and strengthen resilience to natural disasters. Thank you, Chairperson. May I, with your permission, may I hand over to Nusisa for the next section. Thank you.
Thank you, Tabelo. Good afternoon, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable members and officials present. My name is Nosisa Gwama and I'll be taking you through the DOR Amendment Bill for Local Government. So this slide shows the total allocations to local government sphere. In the 2025 adjusted budget, total transfers to local government amounted to 180.6 billion, driven by 7.1 increase in conditional grants, while other components remain unchanged. The 7.1 increase in conditional grants allocation signaling government's intention to accelerate service delivery outcomes. Next slide, please. Then on this slide demonstrate the distribution of the local government equitable share across provinces. The two provinces receiving the largest allocation are Gauteng and KZN. The data currently used in the local government equitable share is outdated and no longer reflects the current population growth, migration patterns, or changes in household poverty levels. In our submission for the 2025, the Commission highlighted that relying on the demographic and socio-economic data from the 2011 census remain a major concern for the intergovernmental fiscal. Next slide, please. This slide focuses on three conditional grants that received the most significant adjustment in the adjusted budget. So if we look at the Municipal Disaster Recovery Grant, the total allocation for this grant increased by 496 million. It rise from 709 million to 1.2 billion in the adjusted budget. This is for reconstruction and rehabilitation of municipal infrastructure damaged by extreme weather in the Eastern Cape. So if we look at the category C municipalities, allocation increased by 75 million in the adjusted budget. That is a 246% rise from the main budget. And then the category B municipalities allocation increased by 420 million in the adjusted budget. Then moving to the second grant, which is the Public Transport Network Grant, total allocations is 7.5 billion for the 2025-26 MTEF, a rolled over of 303 million to allow eThekwini Metro to continue critical work for the operationalization of Corridor 3 of its integrated transport network. The additional 303 million presents both an opportunity and a risk. An opportunity to complete the delayed operationalization of Corridor 3 and a risk of inefficiency if oversight is not strengthened. Then looking at the Urban Development Finance Grant, So the purpose for the 2.1 adjustment is to accelerate metro trading reforms, improve service delivery, and unlock infrastructure financing for metros. Metros are the engine of South African economy, generating the majority of GDP. Their ability to reliably deliver basic services is fundamental to economic productivity and to improving households' well-being. Next slide, please. Then this slide highlights the 15 municipalities in the Eastern Cape affected by the June 2025 extreme weather events that are receiving additional support through the adjusted budget. So 13 of these municipalities are Category B municipalities and 2 are Category C municipalities. All are located within the OR Tambo district and Amatole district municipalities. Strengthening oversight is crucial as local government conditional grants have a long history of underperformance, largely due to poor project planning, procurement delays, and weak financial management. Honorable members, this is particularly important because the municipal disaster recovery grant is a highly targeted grant intended for agent reconstruction, and any deviation from its purpose would delay service restoration and compromise recovery efforts for affected communities. Next slide, please. The 2025 MTBPS prioritizes metro trading services reform to improve financial sustainability, efficiency, and service delivery in water, electricity, and sanitation. An additional 2.1 billion has been allocated to metro trading services component of the Urban Development Finance Grant to expedite reforms. 7 metros are receiving this adjusted allocation, with Nelson Mandela being the only metro not allocated a share of the adjusted budget. Next slide, please. So these are the recommendations emanating from this section. The first one, the Commission reiterates its recommendation from the 2026-27 Division of Revenue Submission that the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, together with the Minister of Finance, accelerate the review of the local government equitable share formula. The revised formula must reflect rapid urban population growth, rising service delivery costs, and the distinctive pressures facing urban municipalities. Secondly, the Commission notes the introduction of the performance-based grant for sustainable urban development aimed at supporting metros to improve water, sanitation, electricity, and waste services. To strengthen our financial sustainability, operational efficiency, and accountability, this reform should be accompanied by clear performance target, transparent reporting, and targeted capacity support. In this context, the Commission recommends that the National Treasury and the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs closely monitor the implementation, assess the impact of the performance-based component on infrastructure management, and extend successful lessons to large secondary cities where appropriate. And lastly, the Commission supports the municipal infrastructure grant reform, introducing the split delivery model, where capable municipalities retain direct funding, while those with ongoing capacity constraints receive indirect support through the Municipal Infrastructure Support Agency and the Development Bank of Southern Africa. Effective implementation requires robust monitoring, clear capability milestone and a defined exit strategy to rebuild the capacity for direct delivery while accelerating the service provision. The Commission therefore recommends that the National Treasury, in collaboration with the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs and MISA, establish clear criteria for municipalities requiring indirect delivery and implement performance-based mechanism to track progress towards restoring direct implementation capacity. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. With your permission, I would like now to hand over to my Chairperson for concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nosisa. Thank you so much, Chairperson. I think that concludes our recommendations on the various bills. We want to hand over back to you for further deliberation. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mbava. And thank you very much to National Treasury team for the presentations, and we also noting your recommendations, FFC. I would now like to give an opportunity to members to deliberate on the presentations put before us. I'll be noting hands. I see the hand of Honorable Ndlovu. Is Honorable Ndlovu the only one who would like to engage on the presentations, colleagues? Members from provincial legislatures, if you are on the platform, you are also welcome to raise or to deliberate on both the presentations made by FFC and National Treasury. Honorable Ndlovu, Honorable Swart, and Honorable Majola. I've only noted 3 hands, colleagues, so those 3 hands will be the only hands that will participate in the deliberations for now. But before handing over to colleagues, I have a few questions for National Treasury and I think 2 for FFC. National Treasury has mentioned in one of their slides a significant and unforeseeable economic and financial events as a reason for adjustments. My interest is to know what specific economic shocks or events prompted these adjustments and how they do impact on, or how are they going to impact on the fiscal targets? And that's my first question. The second question relates to the rollover slides presented. I think it's 2 or 3 slides. Where there's a 5.2 billion in rollovers, which includes the 4.1 billion for social developments. I want to know whether the funds these funds were committed in 2024-25 financial year, and how do these rollovers align with the spending priorities? My last question to National Treasury is, I think on slide 7, I'm not sure, where National Treasury allocated 4.4 billion to provinces, which 3.3 billion is for education, 6.7 is for health and population adjustments, totaling to around 4.6 billion. My question is, how does this 14.4 billion going to address the wage bill pressures in provinces? For example, we all know that there's a shortage of educators and healthcare workers in some of the provinces. And the conditions tied, and the conditions which the allocations were made, are they tied to the hiring or the purpose of retention? My last question on the same matter is, when you referred to the population adjustments, my interest is to know which demographics drives the 4.6 billion and how's the data verified? To the FFC, I think I have only 2 questions, and you noted the persistence credibility risks in the fiscal framework. I want to know what are the 3 biggest risks undermining the fiscal credibility, and how should Parliament prioritize them during our oversight period? This is just an advice that I would like the FFC to give to members of Parliament so that we can play our role as legislators as well, or as we play our oversight. And in one of your slides, you spoke on the revenue performance continuing to lag behind. I want to know if it is your belief that the current tax instruments are adequate or not adequate to stabilize the medium-term fiscal path. Thank you very much. I'll now hand over to Honorable Ndlovu.
Thanks, Chairperson, and greetings to your good self, the National Treasury and FFC, the parliamentary staff, and my colleagues and the members on the platform. Chair, I've got several questions here. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. You may proceed, Honorable.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, on the issue on the presentation of the National Treasury, several votes received major upwards and downwards changes. My question is, what criteria were used to prioritize department for upward adjustment, especially in the frontline basic service delivery areas? The number two, Chair, on the compensation of the employees' pressures. There's a 4.3 billion added to provincial equitable shares to cover wage agreement costs. How will National Treasury ensure that wage increase do not crowd out service delivery budget in provinces? The third one, on also to the National Treasury, is water and sanitation underspending. There is a presentation on Umkondo. Umkomazi delays led to a major downwards adjustment. What corrective measures has National Treasury imposed on Department of Water and Sanitation to fast-track strategic water projects? And the FFC Chair, on the climate-related fiscal shocks, the 2024-2025 floods caused major unplanned expenditure. Should government integrate climate risk buffers into the MTF? And what is the FFC's recommendation approach? The second one on the FFC, Chair, is on the SRD grant extension without full funding. SRD extended to March 2027, but budget pressures remain. What financing model does the FFC propose for a sustainable income support system? My last question to FFC is on the net leg allocation concern. The 132 million allocated for the national dialogue under Labour. What value for money criteria should Parliament apply when examining such allocation? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Ndlovu. Honorable Swart.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I hope that you can hear me. I think that the previous Honorable addressed one of the questions I wanted to pick up. I didn't hear the others, but nevertheless, thank you for the presentations that we received. I've got 2 or 3 questions, Honorable Chair. The one is the adjustment budget reflects significant shifts in spending across several votes. Can I have clarity what transparent measurable criteria guided Treasury's decisions on which departments receive upwards adjustments, particularly in frontline services such as health, education, and municipal infrastructure? I think that question I've heard from Honorable Ndlovu. Then my second question, Honorable Chairperson, given the persistent overspending risks in several provinces, I would like to know which provinces currently pose the greatest fiscal threat to the 25-26 framework, and what early interventions has Treasury already activated to get together with provincial treasuries. Then on the conditional grants reforms, the MTBPS and adjustment budget introduced major changes to conditional grants, including shifts in the education infrastructure grant, reductions in school infrastructure backlogs grant, and the consolidation of agriculture grants. Can Treasury outline its long-term reform strategy for conditional grants across all sectors, and specifically how these reforms, Honourable Chairperson, will improve accountability, performance, measurement, and value for money at provincial and municipal level? And then I think Honourable Ndlovu asked this one on the SRD grants. The adjustment budget extends the SRD grant, but funding certainly beyond this financial year remains unclear, Honourable Chairperson. What financing model does Treasury consider sustainable for the SRD grant through to 2027 without undermining fiscal stability or displacing other essential services? And my second last question, with many municipalities in deep financial distress, Honourable Chairperson, and relying heavily on national transfers, what reforms will Treasury prioritise in 2026 to strengthen municipal revenue collection, curb rising arrears to Eskom and water boards, and restore financial sustainability in local government sphere? And my last question, no, that one I think I've heard was asked, the downward adjustment in water and sanitation, including the delays in Nkomazi water project. Thank you, Honourable Chair. I think that I will conclude with that first.
Thank you, Honourable Swart and Honourable Majola.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to both FFC and National Treasury for the presentation. Starting with slide 7, Madam Chair, on appropriation. As much as I'm partly covered by Honourable Ndlovu with regards to vote 31, the value for money, but my second component of my question, if the National Treasury, there are more than one line item mentioned in terms of that adjustment, if Treasury can maybe simplify for us, give us a breakdown as to each line item, how much are we intending to spend on that one. Slide 13, with regards to the land reformed, the payment of an outstanding order regarding institution claim in KwaZulu-Natal, 467 million. I want to check here, Madam Chair, this matter has been long-standing. I want to check whether is this outstanding court order was for the last financial year. Was it a bill for last year financial year, or is it an accumulative ever since this matter has started? I want to check whether is it a settlement, because I understand that this matter it's still ongoing. Are we anticipating to see this 647 million increasing? Well, if it's an accumulative bill, Madam Chair, again, if the National Treasury can break down since the start of this court case. Slide 15, declaration, declared unspent funds and projected underspending. I want to check, Madam Chair, understanding the exercise we are doing. It's a in-year adjustment. I understand the underspending part, the projected one. Is it a relevant stage to declare an unspent amount at this stage, and what instrument has been used to declare an unspent money during this time of the financial year? Slide 9, Madam Chair, with regards to the Justice Constitutional Development, the Madlanga Commission. I wanted to check with the National Treasury as to on what category are we regarding this. Is it a wasteful? Is it an avoidable expenditure? Well, if so, can at the end of this process, the Commission, when it's been declared wasteful, can we have measures to reclaim this money? On the DORA, Madam Chair, you partly covered me with regards to slide 7, the 4.6 billion regarding provincial equitable share. I wanted to check also the instrument used, whether is it a stats figure or what that determines the deprived during the main budget, as we are adjusting now based on the provinces that were deprived during the budget. What instrument that indicated that exercise? The last one, the proposed change to the MIG. I understand there was a general term used there, Madam Chair, that the rural and urban municipality, and then it was indicated that the rural or the are the ones who seems to battle to spend the MIG grants. And then I want to check with the National Treasury whether is it possible maybe to give us an indication which municipalities have been withdrawn from receiving this, and they will utilize the role of MISA and DBSA in terms of the capacity development. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Majola. The last will be Honorable Numano.
No, thank you very much. Chair, my humble greetings to you and all the members that are present. Chairperson, I have few questions. The first one, it's related to revenue performance and the 2025 fiscal gap. Chairperson, we all know that most of our municipality or department are struggling in terms of revenue collection. So revenue collection is under pressure while expenditure growth pressure is growing. What is the National Treasury's assessment on the risk to the 2026 fiscal framework if revenue growth remain weak like it is now? My second question, Chair, is the issue of compensation of employees pressure, which 14.3 billion has been added to the provincial equitable share to cover wage agreement cost. What will the National Treasury ensure that the wage increase do not crowd out service delivery budget in provinces? That is my second question. I want to go to the issue of the PEFSA here. PEFSA replacement funding 754 M taken from the National Revenue Fund despite U.S. bridge financing. What was the NRF drawn down chosen instead of reprioritizing within the health sector section? So as much as we know the issue of PEPSA is of concern to all of us, even our community. So I want to know as to what will drawn down chosen instead of prioritizing within the health sector. I think these are my questions. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Numalo, and thanks to the honorable members for the question posed to both the National Treasury and FFC. I will start with the responses from National Treasury, then I'll give to FFC to make or to respond to questions by members. Makharekwe.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and members for the questions. So I'll ask Dr. Pakis followed by Jan to start responding. Then I'll complete the response from IGR on the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, and then we'll hand over to DDG for Public Finance and her team for responses. Dr. Pakis, on the issues of data.
Thank you, DDG and Chairperson, and good afternoon, honorable members again. So maybe it's important to note at this point that the data that is used to update the provincial equitable share, on one part, it is the data that comes from Stats SA, so it's official Stats data that they share with us. And then on the other hand, it is the data that we refer to as administrative data. So there's a huge component that is informed by administrative data coming from the Department of Basic Education as well as the Department of Health as well. So that is what drives in the main the provincial equitable share. But specifically to the cushioning, so this is the data that we get on a yearly basis from Stats SA that we then use to update the formula. So this time around in the main budget, when we updated the formula, the changes were quite significant for these three provinces. Which is where then the cushioning stat had to be really talked about, where these three provinces indicated to the minister that these shifts have an impact, of course, in terms of what is currently on the ground in terms of the plans and the commitments that these provinces had. So the mid-year population estimates data is the one that is the biggest push for that. But also Stats SA have also given us the latest available information in terms of the GDP data as well. So that added to the shifts as a result of the media population really created this huge hole in the process. And we couldn't from our side just ignore it, because there is a principle within the provincial equitable share that we use the most recent credible data there is to update the formula. And the most credible and available data that we had at the time is the one that we got from Stats SA, which then pushed those demographics in favor of other provinces and leaving these other three provinces with a big gap. So on the data side, that's the issue. But there's also another question. It's a very great question from I think it's Honorable it's Honorable Swart on the strategy around the conditional grants, the long-term vision there. And I think in the main, honorable members, it is about improving value for money. It is about ensuring that the predictability within the system and the trust in the system, is ensured through this conditional grant, which then for us catalyze the service outcomes where they are mostly needed, but also in a more sustainable manner. And we don't look at conditional grant as a system of their own. So we look at conditional grant as a subsystem within the intergovernmental system, meaning that, they go hand in hand with the equitable share, which is why, for instance, in the library space, we are talking about phasing the grant into the equitable share. So that is a by design kind of an approach. So in the long term, when everything works well, there shouldn't be conditional grants really. It should just be the equitable share in a space where subnational government can make these decisions independently and make the decisions in the right kind of areas. But we're not there yet, honorable members. Where we are, there's still really gaps. So we do have a phased approach. So we started with rationalizing and just simplifying. So we consolidating the overlaps around the grants across the sectors. And then the next steps, of course, are improving the formulas, ensuring that they're responding to the current reality on the ground, the data that is used to inform those. But also it's about the pipeline, readiness pipeline. So it's about how then the spending agencies, in our case, provinces and municipalities, are supported by national, as Section 154 of the Constitution commands, that, there is some support that is provided, ensuring that there is readiness in the lifestyle cycle pipeline and discipline that is ensured. One other area that we're moving towards, to honorable members, is then on the performance incentives. Having established the systems, we need to move to a point where performance is incentivized quite greatly through this, to ensure that as we cover the backlogs, but we also gravitate towards efficiency in the spend as well. So we are continuing to add into, the many levers that we have to ensure that really the share of allocation is also looking at verified outputs, not just the spend, a part of it. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done across the sectors to close that loop. Integration of planning within also, the climate change, that's another area, the conditional grants, especially in the built environment space, being reformed to then help in that space, so that we don't talk really just about how we're responding to disasters, but also how we are gearing up, ensuring that we are incentivizing the right kind of actions around the planning, ensuring that when we do the planning, the building plans actually cognizant of the kind of climate change imperatives. The issue of data, the transparency and accountability as well, how then to ensure that the conditional grant system, is adhering, was helping us achieve and aligned to the PFMA, MFMA, and all the other spatial development planning parts of as well. So what then becomes key, honorable members, is the speed with which capacity can be wrapped up at the spending level, but also those that are managing the grant, and also the market reforms. How then do we start to ensure that we incentivize the private sector resources and expertise, as those are quite critical in closing the gap, because even in a perfect situation where the spending agencies are able to spend, there's just not enough money that can be made available to deal with all the backlogs and issues that we have as a country. So we do want to create that space where the private sector is also able to play into the space. So in a nutshell, the long-term state really is on streamlined grants, but grants that started to respond to the multi-year pipelines where maintenance backlogs are dealt with. So where the decisions whether to maintain or build new assets is well thought of and implemented. But it's also just about how we improve the intergovernmental cooperation across the three spheres of government. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Chair. Jan Harting. Chair, I will respond mainly to Honourable Swart's questions about municipal financial sustainability. I think, Chair, the first point that we need to share with the committee is the Minister of Finance has recently approved the overarching strategy that the Treasury has developed, and that strategy is called the Strategy to Address Municipal Performance Failures. Chair, I'm sure we can make that available to the committee. Largely what the strategy is focusing on is what we refer to as 6 game changers or priorities. And those 6 is focusing on funded budgets. It's focusing on revenue management. It focuses on asset management. It focuses on supply chain management. The MSCOA reform, which is the Municipal Standard Chart of Accounts, where we have standardized the way in which municipalities prepare their accounts. And then obviously all of these things then have a direct impact on the audit outcomes going forward. So that's firstly the overarching strategy. At the heart of sustainability, Chair, is municipalities that still do not table funded budgets. So at the heart of the challenges is the formulation of a municipal budget. And Honourable Chair, with all the efforts that we've put in place and all the tools and all the education that we've done, we still find ourselves where there's councils that adopt unfunded budgets. And for the current cycle that we are implementing, there's still 88 municipalities that have not tabled a funded budget. By implication, Chair, what it means is it's a guaranteed cash flow crisis as you start implementing that budget. As far as the revenue improvement program is concerned, essentially, Chair, what this program is trying to facilitate is to assist municipalities to expand their revenue potential. And some of these things are very simplistic, but it's things that municipalities have not necessarily paid attention to. For instance, the reconciliation quarterly of what's contained in your valuation roll, what is in your billing system, and what the information that's contained in the deeds office. And essentially what that then translates into to determine whether all the properties that is in the jurisdiction of a municipality are being built. That's one example. The second one is we have designed tools and offered a lot of training to assist municipalities as part of the budget preparation process to then understand the full cost of delivering a service, and by implication, when put together tariffs that make sense for recouping the cost associated with those services. Chair, the members is familiar with the debt relief program that the Minister of Finance has announced 2 years ago. And there's 71 municipalities that participate in that program. The good news is, Chair, 24 municipalities have demonstrated that it's possible to conform to the requirements in the circular that we've issued, Circular 124, and there's 14 conditions that municipalities have to conform to. but 24 municipalities have benefited from the first 1/3 write-off by offering and report and state to the conditions. And that by implication means they have received a benefit of Eskom when writing off the historical debt in their books. Chairperson, then we also, not all municipalities unfortunately has honored that process. So we are exploring, as in the medium-term budget policy statement indicated by the Minister, that there's a distribution agency arrangement between Eskom and the municipalities. So this is work in progress, where if a municipality are not in a position to really run their electricity services sustainably, that there can be support. Chair, unfortunately, there's legal processes that have to be followed. In addition to that, Honourable Swart, we have a program where we deployed advisors to those municipalities that struggle to do the basics. And that program, as part of the reforms that's been initiated at the national level, and it affects the whole conditional grant review process that Dr. Pakis has spoken about. It also impacts on the Treasury's own ability to have a coherent approach to design our own support programs so that we do get maximum value for the support that we offer municipalities. So, Honourable Chair, that's in a nutshell some of the programs that we've institutionalized. So largely it's a service that the Treasury renders to all municipalities, but with the support of provincial treasuries, and it means consistently providing support in terms of Section 154 of the Constitution. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, Ian and Letsepa. Just to add to the responses, maybe just to add on the issue of cushioning that, Honourable Chair and members, normally we do that between the census, between the two censuses, so we don't do it every year, so that members maybe don't expect that if there is a change next year in the equitable share, there might be also the cushioning of some provinces. So we do it when there's those big amounts between the two censuses. Like now is 2011 versus 2022. On the issue of addressing the ongoing wage bill pressure, yes, indeed, part of that 14.4 billion, there's 3 billion in education and 3 billion, just below 3 billion in health as well. That is going really just for retaining the current professionals in the system. While there's also obviously addition of 800 million for appointments. So there's that recognition that there's a need for managing that or addressing the wage bill pressure. Yes, so the issue of 4.3 that was covered, the wage increase. Members will recall that the money for the wage bill increase in any event was provided not now, but during the main budget. It was part of the allocations that were made to provinces. But just to say that, and by obviously providing this additional funding all the time, we're really making sure that COE does not crowd out other areas, even though it might grow in proportion. But at least we know that there's no moving of funds from, for example, for capital to compensation, or from goods and services, and then there's no money. So I think by providing that money from national government level helps with that issue of not making sure that compensation of employees does not crowd out other areas. So in terms of which departments received upward at provincial level, honourable members, is education and health at the moment that have received that additional funding. So on the local government side, really is the metros, and I think the point was made by FFC that only Nelson Mandela Bay did not receive of the 8 metros, and it was because they did not submit council approved strategies for those 3 services, the water, electricity, and sanitation, as presented by FFC. So because we said it's an incentive performance-based grant, so that's the reason. But those are that receive funding. On the issue of overspending, which provinces pose significant risk, we can certainly say it's KZN at the moment, because KwaZulu-Natal, both education and health are under significant pressure, as well as Free State to some extent, especially in education. So what we're doing, starting with KwaZulu-Natal, is that for the education department, what we have done, we've asked World Bank to help us with a kind of spending review, a detailed spending review to get a sense of what really are the main issues that are leading to the challenges that the department is facing at the moment. But also what we are aware of is that the province, through the provincial treasury, has some provincial interventions in terms of Section 18 of the PFMA, where they've even asked these 2 departments to have a turnaround plan to ensure that they're able to make sure that they're within budget. But the significant pressures do exist in these 2 sectors in that province. And we're hoping that part of the money that is received through the equitable share now will help address, kind of reduce that bit of a pressure that exists in that province. With regards to Free State, it's kind of an old pressure that existed in education, in particular. Also, that one have been trying to we've been meeting with the provincial treasury and the department to go deeper into their personnel costs to see what really are the challenges, because and we meet monthly and quarterly in this regard to ensure that we deal with that issue. So on the issue of MIG, I think it was not answered to, but so maybe on the question of Honorable Majola is that so this kind of reform, or what we're proposing, is for the 2026 MTF. So we do not have that list yet, but just to say, in the current financial year, there are those municipalities that MISA is implementing MIG on their behalf, is 21 of them, and they are in the division of revenue, but I think we can always provide at least to the committee. Yeah, I think then we from our side, we have answered all the questions. Then we'll hand over to Ulrike and team. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. We will also distribute the questions amongst ourselves. So we will start with Babetse and then work our way through that. And then I'll come in at the end to answer any of the cross-cutting questions. Over to you, Babetse.
Thank you, Ulrike, and good afternoon, honorable members. Mine is one on the declared unspent funds and the water and sanitation for the Umkomazi. So as part of our monthly and quarterly monitoring of departments, we check where there are delays and assist where we can be able to address some of the bottlenecks. And in this case, as DDG mentioned in her presentation, the key issues that cause delay in the implementation of the Umkomazi project is the need to finalize user service agreements and also finalize the procurement program. So what we're doing here is, because we know they will not be able to spend all this money this financial year, we have agreed with the department to be realistic in terms of when they will really be spending, which is going to be 28, 29. So this shift that we see here as the declared spending is reprioritized to the respective years in which we know they will be spending. So that's how it's being arranged this way. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. So I'm going to address two questions, one raised by Honorable Swart around the SRD and the other one raised by Honorable Mumalo on the issue of PEPFAR. On the issue of SRD funding, beyond this financial year remaining unclear, and how can this be done without putting the fiscals under pressure? So, honorable members, in the budget, in the MTBPS document, the statement indicates that the SRD is going to be extended for another year, whilst other measures are looked at trying to link beneficiaries with employment initiatives. So just to put you at ease, within the fiscal framework that has been tabled, so the SRD funding is already included within the fiscal framework, and that will just be confirmed towards the budget, and the allocation will be confirmed towards the budget. So there is funding for it. It won't have to be outside of the fiscal framework that has been presented before Parliament. On the issue of PEPFAR funding and the issue of the US bridge plan, honorable members, you'll recall that the PEPFAR allocation that is currently part of the special appropriation bill was allocated in terms of Section 16 of the Public Finance Management Act, which deals with the use of funds in emergency situations. So that allocation was an emergency, and hence it was the Minister of Finance made that allocation sometimes around towards the end of June, even before we could know much about the PEPFAR bridge plan that has been announced by the US government. And I just wish to reiterate that Section 16.3 of the PFMA also indicate that money allocated in terms of Section 16 of the PFMA is a direct charge against the National Revenue Fund, and hence the drawdown was directly against the contingency reserve that was announced. I think at the time of the 2025 budget, it was 5 billion rand. So that money gets used for such emergencies. And as you've heard from my colleagues from IGR, the provincial health budgets are quite under pressure. And our analysis has shown that this funding could not be accommodated through reprioritization of funds or of provincial health budgets, and hence the drawdown from the contingency reserve. Thanks very much, Shane.
Is that it from National Treasury?
No, Honorable Chairperson, apologies. Lebo, do you want to come in on the rollover that we have in rural development?
Thank you very much, DDG, and thank you very much to the Chair and the principals in the room. Chair, sorry for not putting my camera on. I'm not feeling well. In terms of the land restitution, the claim, the rollover, there was a court, interdict, against the department by a certain family in the KZN. And the outcome of the court resulted in a settlement between the department and the family. But that settlement was made to be a court, a judgment that needs to be observed by the department and to honor it. So hence the rollover that was requested by the department, because they needed to honor the cost settlement towards that family as part of the land claims compensation. But also the department had some, a process in terms of interfacing or transitioning from an old system to a new system in terms of payment of the land claims, and that process alone resulted in some delays as part of the transition and trying to make sure that data as it migrates to the new system is correctly done so. And that is what led to some of the delays as part of the backlog on land restitution glimpse. Thank you, Chair.
Good afternoon, honorable members. It's Rendani here. I will deal with the question raised by Honorable Majola. Let me link his question with the question raised by, I think it's Honorable Swart, when he spoke about the criteria used to allocate additional funds. The legal basis of the adjustment budget is Section 30 of the PFMA, which provides for, I'll just highlight a few, which provides for unforeseeable and unavoidable expenditure announced by the Minister of Finance as part of the tabling of the main budget, shifting of funds between vote, etc. So that's what guides this process, leading to additional allocations to different vote as a criteria. Now moving on to a question raised by Honorable Majola. The 148 million allocated for the Matlanga Commission falls under the category unforeseeable and unavoidable expenditure. So the question that you are raising regarding fruitless and wasteful, I think, let me say, these are early days. The Commission has just started with its work. We'll see the product it generates. But let's just assume, because the issue of whether it's fruitless or wasteful, it will be known at the end, especially after the audit. So let's just assume that maybe in the end, the audit will say it's fruitless and wasteful. There's a framework that guides that process, just like a framework that guides how we deal with irregular, how we deal with unauthorized expenditure. When coming to fruitless and wasteful, there's a framework. For example, an accounting officer must do the investigations, what caused that, and who is responsible, how can we recover the money from that person responsible. But the long and short of it is that there is a framework in the event that if it's irregular or unauthorized or fruitless and wasteful. So there are frameworks guiding these outcomes. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Rendani. So, Chair, just two last cross-cutting questions. Honorable Majola asked about the criteria to declare unspent funds. So this honorable member is related to our assessment of the likelihood of departments spending money, and what are the circumstances around that. So as Pabetse had mentioned earlier, this forms part of our normal oversight over expenditures, and where we see things are not going the way they should, it is about what are the rectifying principles that the departments are busy following to ensure that they spend the money. So in the case of the Department of Transport, it was because Sandral was sitting on a lot of money, and by giving Sandral more money, by the department transferring more money to Sandral, and the inability to spend that money fast enough would mean that that money would just sit there and earn interest. In the same way that Pabetse had explained about the Department of Water and Sanitation, where construction hasn't started. So knowing that 3 billion rand was allocated for construction this financial year, and it's unlikely that construction is going to start this year. In fact, it's unlikely that it's even going to start next year, means that we are able to then declare those funds as unspent allocations. Honourable Chair, in relation to your question around significant economic shocks prompting adjustments, so just following on from Dr. Randela's comments and the classification around expenditure that we have in Section 30 for the adjustments budget, a category that you can use to adjust the budget would be Section 32A, which is the significant and unforeseeable economic events. We don't have any adjustments related to that in this adjustments budget. We are presenting on unforeseeable and unavoidable expenditure in terms of Section 32B. In the special appropriation, we have allocations in terms of Section 16, and that's Section 32C. Section 32D relates to expenditures already announced by the Minister. This would include the provisional allocations that we have to provinces in health and education, the provisional allocations for ECD, the metro trading services and the like. The shifting of funds between votes, which would be E, Section 32E, would be what we're showing you, what I presented on transport moving to other votes. The violence would be in terms of Section 32F, and the rollovers would be in terms of Section 32G. So just to clarify, there aren't any, so because we didn't have any economic shocks that would have prompted us to adjust our fiscal targets, that would allow us to use that provision to make adjustments in the budget. That's where we end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Team National Treasury. I'll now hand over to Dr. Mbava to lead the responses of members.
Thank you so much, Chairperson, for the questions. Thank you. I think I would just address one question, and then I'll ask, I think there's a commissioner on the platform who might want to comment, and then also the research team. Chair, I like the question you ask with regards to what are some of the major risks that Parliament should be monitoring. I think from this budget, we can all agree that one of the biggest risks that is facing us as a country is the rising public debt and the debt service costs that are associated with that. The outlook that we see as FFC is that these rising public debt remains a fiscal risk, and that Parliament must monitor it. And if we look at the rising debt service cost, and if we measure these as a share of both the GDP and also the revenue, we can see that we have an increasingly fragile fiscal position. And this can potentially also progress towards liquidity pressures as well. So if we do not manage this debt as a country, it can actually spiral out of control, and it can mushroom. And what Parliament then needs to do is to ensure that this debt is managed properly. And managing that debt means that there is a proper debt and expenditure management process that is in place, and that this debt does not turn out to become runaway debt. Because what's going to happen then is that if we have runaway debt and that is spiraling out of control, it will also compel government then to just borrow money just to service that existing debt, to pay those obligations, instead of borrowing to grow the economy and to ensure there is economic development. So we'll just be borrowing just to service the debt. And then also, Chair, one of the key drivers then of that rising debt service cost and rising public debt position is the issue of the risks that we see within the contingent liabilities and the state guarantees to these SOEs. And one of the key SOEs that we need to watch and monitor, as we have rightfully said so in this submission as FFC, that we need to have a clear plan and reforms that are given to oversight to ensure that these key SOEs, primarily is Transnet, SANRAL, and Eskom, these remain a key risk to the fiscal outlook, because the bailouts to these institutions remains quite high, especially for Eskom. So what we need to do then is to ensure that any future bailouts that we give to these entities, they are clear and credible plans that are given to oversight to ensure that we can hold them accountable, and that the governance reforms that they put forward, these are also credible and that we can follow the money, basically, where it's going. So we have said as FFC in our submission that if we give more money to state-owned entities, then they must ensure that they give us credible restructuring plans, and also there are reforms. We know that now we are also absorbing SANRAL as debt as a country, along with the 30% of that is to Joburg. I think the city of Joburg is also absorbing a portion of that, but the lion's share of it is the taxpayer who's absorbing that. So we need to ensure that we follow the money and ensure that these state-owned entities do not further destabilize the fiscal path that National Treasury is putting forward to say that they want to achieve 2.5% of GDP by 2027-28 as part of the primary budget balance. That remains very precarious if the fiscal position is not sustained between now and then. So I think, Chair, one of the biggest risks then is to ensure that we manage the debt and that Parliament really satisfy itself that there are effective debt and expenditure management plans to ensure that this debt is dealt with. It doesn't mushroom out of control. We do not borrow further just to service the debt. But whatever we borrow, it must be for capital and also for economic development. I think I'll pause there, Chair, and I would like to find out if Commissioner Fowler, he's got a question or comments or thoughts with regards to some of the questions that were asked. And then the research head and his team can also take the questions. Commissioner Fowler, if you are still on the platform, you can share your thoughts or comments.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Honourable Chairperson of the committee and honourable members. There's just two areas I'd like to address, and the one relates to the current system of providing grants for the construction of houses, etc., is something where there's a gap that exists, and the gap is that the housing that is built and any other infrastructure that is built through national grants or provincial grants, but it's mostly national grants, and it's managed by the provinces, that the maintenance section of that has to be catered for by the municipalities to which where the infrastructure is going to be built. And I think that's an area where it hasn't been done and has resulted in the current situation that we have. And I think it's an area that we need to look at, and the consolidation of the grants will be an area that will address that. The second issue relates to mitigation for climate change. And the mitigation measures for climate change are not something that can happen instantly. It's something that must happen over a period of time. So as climate change happens, there would be more intense rainfalls, there would be more intense dry seasons, and so there would be pressures on both sides. And the question is that infrastructure then has to be managed to ensure that there's that the predicted changes that are happening is not just about the carbon emissions, but also about what you do about infrastructure, raising bridges so that when there are floods, the bridges are not flooded, moving people from riverbanks, and noting that the riverbanks may rise beyond what was previously a line, and that so it's a longer term initiative. So we may have flooding catastrophes for some time until we are able to get to that point where we've have invested sufficiently in the mitigation measures to avoid that. That would be the only two comments that I would make, which was addressing some of the risks, the fiscal risks in the long term. Thank you, Chair. We may turn it over to our research team to answer some of the questions. Thank you.
Chen, you may go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. And just in support of what, thank you, first of all, Honourable Chair members, for the questions, and especially of the appreciation for separating the addressee of the questions. I think that is very well commended, that of certain questions is targeted for National Treasury and certain ones for FFC. Honourable Chair members, for the three risks in support and following, in addition to my chairpersons, which is wholly correct, is that we have actually passed that point of a debt spiral when we or when one is borrowing and for just servicing the debt. And so in that vein, not just for the mere fact that it means that we're essentially just servicing and this ballooning debt, but also it sends out an incredibly weakened signal to the market, especially to the investors. Imagine that ourselves, say, being an potential investor in anything, in any instruments, and you hear that the focus of this instrument being still alive and requesting for more funds is to service its own debt. It sends a terrible signal, and no one will want to actually invest in such a financial instrument because the returns, in fact, is negative. And so that's why at pains that as FFC, we ask for the restructuring of the debt portfolio. And rightfully so, is that currently, with the world economy in its current state, where US is busy dealing with its own economic issues and have actually reduced its Fed rate, the Federal Reserve rate, and weakening their US dollars, it puts us in just the right time. Right, in relative speaking, in terms of our rate of returns on our bond, as I indicated in our last joint address briefing, is that now is the right time to do this restructuring by engaging the market to change our portfolios of debt. Second risk is there is a fiscal trajectory risks, Honourable Chair members, is that remember that before this medium-term budget policy and from the budget 2.0 to 3.0, there was first the assumed the VAT increase, and we increased actually a lot of the allocations to the subnational spheres of government, provinces and local governments. In 3.0, the one that the Parliament has passed into this financial year, did not change in accordance with the withdrawal of that VAT. Now, in this adjustment, there's even more dishing right out and additions of these funds and allocations in the adjustments and amendments. It's indicative of something that we are fearful of, because in the inner adjustments and at this point in time, notwithstanding the huge injections at the beginning of the financial year and also in somewhat into the financial year, because that was done in May and so forth, it very bodes poorly for implementation in such a manner that we actually fear actually there is a likelihood of this fiscal dumping happening. For instance, PEPFAR. We have listened up and down with the responses, but understand that we're still not clear about why we have a PEPFAR in the special appropriation, whilst that there has already been the exemptions, and so that the foreign aid is still ongoing. So in other words, now should we still approve the special appropriations, because once it's approved, the money is out the door, whether or which section of the PFMA it abided by. And yet there is no funding issue in that sense. Why then should this PEPFAR now be being processed through Parliament? That's a question that is of a risk of that fiscal dumping. Lastly, there is a divisional revenue instrument dilution risk in all of this, because as much as we, FFC, is in support of responding sort of proactively and even adequately to these disasters and these damages, there is a danger right now that these grants and mergence of grants, and also the implementation, channeling of these grants being pushed between the indirect to direct, and then from direct grants to unconditional grants, in such a manner that there are two sides of this. One is that, number one, what is it exactly is it supposed to do? As you heard Commissioner Professor Fowler has pointed out, is that some of these grants now should maybe be thought of more from a different angle, from infrastructure development and resilience, climate resilience, adaptive infrastructure build, as opposed to some kind of a big bag of money approach to this disaster. But now this is now funding pushing through some of the conditional direct grants and some of it into equitable share. Then what does it mean for the equitable share formula allocations that is supposedly the principle of it is supposed to have been objective, it's supposed to be formula driven and data informed. Secondly, just on the revenue tax instrument sufficiency issue, Honourable Chair, your question is that in the midst of all of this, as I mentioned last, is that it does not make sense that from a macro fiscal perspective, as well as micro, that we had a revenue over collection. We are in a good space in terms of global economic relative positioning in terms of our debt restructuring opportunity. And we are also in a good space in terms of some of these opportunities in terms of finances. It really, really drives a question mark as to why then we need to look into the revenue tax instruments, and that because that if we do, without these justifications or motivations grounded in good, solid economic shocks, it then gives rise to fiscal uncertainty, policy uncertainty. One wonders why government is doing this, as our people would wonder clearly. I think many of the other questions are on the SRD, financing mechanisms, and so forth. These are one questions that National Treasury have answered, and Honourable Majola on the value for money. It's the right question, but I wonder if the satisfaction is received or is achieved through the various responses. And I think lastly is that up and down these adjustments and the amendments, understand that when it's this much of an adjustment, and especially for infrastructure related questions and performance related questions, it's reaching to a point whereby it will come the main budget, and FSC will prepare, like we did, the actual expenditure versus the main budget and adjustment budget analysis to show honourable chair members and the and Parliament that how far
we are as a country between what we planned, budgeted, and what actually was the result. And I think from as you recall, earlier this year, that, shall we say, scorecard was not particularly good. And I think it speaks to some of the lack of responsiveness and lack of responsive budgeting, unfortunately, that is in our budgeting process, even including this adjustment process that is of the MDBPS. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Chair. Maybe, Chair, just to also add in the comment with regards to the PEPFAR funding. So I think we need to just maybe apply our mind as to why are we duplicating what has already been done. So we know that the US has already covered the PEPFAR for 6 months. Exactly this financial year up until the end of March next year. And yet we are also doing a further allocation for the same thing, which is already covered by the US PEPFAR bridge plan. So we're also giving this money to the provincial health departments, and we don't know what they're going to do exactly with it. That money can just go down a drain. It can just be absorbed into paying invoices, because we know that these provincial health departments have outstanding supplier invoices, and they have a lot of outstanding payments they must do. So we don't know how we're going to monitor this, because now this money is no longer going to the NGOs, which normally would have received it. It's just going to the provincial health department. And how are we going to monitor that? And yet they are still going to receive the PEPFAR bridge plan. So I think the question is this the good use of resources by our government to withdraw money from the National Revenue Fund to fund something that is already being funded by the US government for the next 6 months? And also we take this money from the National Revenue Fund. We're not even giving it to the NGOs. We are just giving it to provincial health departments who are going to use it in any way they wish. So we don't even know that that money is actually going to reach the beneficiaries. So, Chair, maybe that bill then needs to be reconsidered, the one where we are allocating this money for PEPFAR as government, given the fact that it has already been covered already by the US government. Thanks so much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And I must indicate that we are noting all the recommendations and the pointers made by your good selves. Thank you very much, Team National Treasury and Team FFC, for detailed responses. Honorable members of the committee, representatives from the National Treasury and the FFC, I want to really extend my sincere appreciation to both the teams from FFC and National Treasury for the comprehensive briefings on the 2 bills put before us today. I must indicate that your insights to navigating unforeseen economic challenges and addressing disaster recovery needs and managing fiscal shifts are invaluable as we steer our country towards resilience. As members of the committee and parliament, we'll dig deeper into the implications of environments, the rollovers and the equitable shares, ensuring that every adjustment serves the people's priorities. As I always indicate, that ours is the interest of our people at heart. Colleagues, on behalf of the committee, I would like to send our warmest wishes of speedy recovery to Honorable Siwisa and Honorable Ngumalo, not forgetting our content advisor, Honorable Zomo. Even though Honorable Ngumalo managed to join the meeting today, we're looking forward to your return and you'll always be kept in our prayers. Colleagues, just a quick reminder that Friday we'll be meeting with SALGA, where they will be briefing us on the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill. and the PBO will also be briefing us on both the bills. So members must prepare themselves for a meeting on Friday, 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock. Having said that, colleagues, honorable members, FFC, National Treasury, the support staff of the committee, and any other stakeholder that might be on the platform. This brings us to the end of our meeting, and thank you very much once again for making time for an afternoon meeting. My pleasure, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.